We are constantly told that great leaders need to be tough, decisive, thick skinned, aggressive, able to handle pressure without flinching. But think about it, listeners. What if that narrative is leaving out some of the most effective leaders? People who process information deeply, who pick up on what others miss, who feel the energy in a room before anyone says a word. Welcome back, listeners, to the BizBlend Podcast, where we mix business strategy with human reality. I'm your host, Sana, as always, and today we are tackling something that might sound counterintuitive in this fast paced world of business. What if being highly sensitive isn't a weakness, but actually a competitive advantage? Especially now as AI and automation reshape the workplace. That's a super interesting question, right, listeners? And to help us answering that question, my guest today is Sira Laurel. She's the founder of North of Normal and someone who has spent 15 years in senior HR and people leadership roles before dedicating herself to coaching leaders through the lens of neuroscience. And she specializes in highly sensitive people, lead effectively, and she's making the case that as we move further into an AI driven economy, these individuals aren't just keeping up, they're uniquely positioned to excel. With two master's degrees, certifications in neuroscience coaching and highly sensitive people, 4 years as a Berkman method consultant, Sira translates brain science into practical leadership strategies. And today we are going to dig into what neuroleadership actually means and why being highly sensitive might be a secret weapon and whether this whole framework holds up under scrutiny or not. So, Sira, welcome to BizBlend, and as always, it's such an honor to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
And I'm very sure many of our listeners are so lightened up right now because, you know, it has been a kind of a way of perceiving someone that if, especially when it comes to leadership roles, that okay, if he or she, if they are very sensitive or maybe emotional, they're weak and they cannot handle such high pressure roles. So definitely it's going to be a very, very helpful conversation. So to begin with, I think a lot of business leaders, when they hear about neuro leadership, like either they glaze over or wonder like if it's just the latest management trend. So for our BizBlend listeners, Sira, if you can, explain that how neuro leadership holds any relevance in the data driven hard world of business here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fair question. Why do I have to learn this? What is this new thing, and when is it going to fade? When the next new thing or theory comes up. And
Mhm.
what I like to say about neuro leadership is that it's the only theory of leadership I think anyone should be paying attention to. It merges neuroscience, that's the neuro part of the term, with leadership development. So
Mhm.
it's leveraging brain science, right, which is the thing that we're all using to navigate the world and our relationships and work, right? Everything. So it's just using brain science to understand and improve how we as leaders, and that is whether you are leading yourself, leading others, leading other leaders, or leading an enterprise, improving how we as leaders think, decide, and interact so that we can actually and sustainably boost team performance, collaboration, increase resilience, because we're applying these insights, right, on areas like social needs, emotion, learning, change. So it's the bridge between scientific research and practical application,
Mhm.
so that we aren't just trying some unfounded best practiced strategy for managing people and driving organizational success. We're using best evidence, right, for managing people and driving organizational success.
Mm. Mm. And if I understand it correctly, it's, like understanding how our brains react, respond to stress and stimulation that actually changes leadership behavior, and that too in measurable ways, because there's a logic here. I can definitely see the logic here, but then, you know, we are seeing market shifts right now. We have seen pandemic crisis happen, competitors making moves. Like sometimes we, as a leader, I need to react quickly, or I need to push through stress. I need to make, second like decisions in seconds or minutes without having time to check in with my nervous system. So um, isn't there a risk that this approach slows down leaders or makes them overly cautious when speed and decisiveness are what actually is needed?
And it's here where I would ask anyone who, and it's fair for us to be thinking this way, because either the sense of urgency, we feel it, or it's actually communicated that we need to go faster. We have to go faster. We must keep up and compete. And there's so much going on. We've got to react to it right now. But I would argue that 99% of the time, that urgency is unearned. And there is time to check in with your nervous system. There is time to, ask a question of someone, to raise a hand and offer an alternative perspective, or to even ask for more time, um, to take the time to do a little bit more research about a thing before deciding a way forward. We have habitualized speed for unearned urgency, and our nervous systems are used to this speed. And what we know about the brain, right, is that once we've learned a thing, to even if that current state is unhealthy, right, if it's unnecessary or doesn't serve us in the long run, our brain still wants to do that thing because it knows that thing. And it takes a lot of energy, and the brain doesn't want to spend energy. It wants to conserve as much energy as possible. It takes a lot of energy to change the way that we've been doing things. And so even change that's good for us, like slowing down, taking more time to make a decision, right? Examining all possible angles before making the call.
Mm-hmm.
Our nervous system still reacts as if that's a negative. But we have, right, control, or that we have our executive functioning, and we can use neuroleadership to move beyond instinct, right? Move beyond an immediate emotional reaction, move beyond, a coping mechanism, a way of working that is only maybe serving us in the short term. And I would argue in most cases isn't even serving us in the short term, but let alone the long term, right? To a more effective way of working. And I think what people often think of when they think, "Oh, we're gonna slow things down," is the immediate uh, interpretation of that is that it's going to be problematic. That if we slow down, slowing down means missed opportunity. And I would just question that, right? It's like, give me an example of when that has happened, right? Give me an example, right, of when actually maybe just calling one other person to ask for their opinion before, launching into action has like cost you, right, that outcome that you were hoping to achieve, versus, oh, it actually helped you think differently about that situation. It helped calm you down, right? It helped give you more information to make a more evidence-based decision. I think when most people actually reflect and are hard pressed to find an example of a time when just taking a little bit longer, right, didn't lead to a better outcome, and then we start to have a real conversation about speed and urgency. It's really only in, an emergency situation that we want to be acting with as much urgency as we are right now in every single situation. Like, if we need to get out of the house because it's burning, I'm not going to ask for consensus around whether we should get out of the house. Like, let's get out of the house, everybody. The front door is this way. But in the workplace, right? If you're not in a hospital setting about to save a life, where the quickness again is like life or death, in most of us are in environments working where even just an additional 5 minutes can make a difference to your internal operating system, right? Your nervous system and its functionality, and then extending to, the person that you're dealing with, or the organization, right, you're inside of, or the community and the country, right? It extends, to all sides of the external system. Just a little bit more time on the front end avoids a lot of costly mistakes and costly reversals of decisions that are made through unearned urgency.
That makes sense. I mean, we cannot equate life to Squid Games,
Yeah.
but but then, you know, kind of a pushback here, not from my side, because once again, I have had conversations on these, like there is like, and before that, one quick thing that, I also feel is when we talk about, specific roles or situations, I think we we miss talking about something which is training and preparedness. And I think that training and preparedness, if not done, and when you're not checking your nervous system, when you're just reacting out of that unearned urgency, I think that's where you are prone to make blunders or mistakes, which is going to cost you maybe uh, your business or maybe your circumstances, whatever it is. But I think that training and preparedness is a very necessary part of it. Whether it's your workplace or sometimes in life also. I mean, uh, like we are talking about disaster preparedness or preparedness for um, economic crisis or financial crisis. I mean, if you look at the world right now, it's really very uncertain. Um, and similarly, something that I have had so many discussions, Sira, is especially a lot of leadership training in corporate America. It draws heavily from the military models like chain of command, mission focus, discipline. The idea that you suppress emotions and personal needs for the greater objective. And that mindset has built incredibly effective organizations, leaders who can actually perform under extreme pressure. How do we reconcile neuroleadership and this focus on sensitivity, nervous system regulation with a model that, would essentially say your feelings don't matter, the mission matters?
Yeah, it's a tough one to reconcile with
It is.
some of the some of the expectations that leaders have on staff to kind of get on board and get in line and get it done. But again, what I would argue is that, if the mission matters, then people have to matter, because who's executing the mission? It's
Mm,
people.
mm,
And if you have people who are working in distressed states, they're not the most productive, they're not the most creative, they're not the best decision makers, because they're operating outside of this window of optimal performance, which we all have. We all have this space where, with the right amount of challenge, right, an appropriate level of challenge, and a substantial enough set of knowledge, skills, and abilities, we are all high performers. Right? And that is in the context too of whatever our external environment is as well. So there's a third part there. But we're all high performers under the right conditions, all to say.
mm,
And it is the job, the expectation, in my view, the responsibility of organizational leaders to create those conditions for their people, so that those people can perform strongly, right,
Mhm.
against this mission, against the set of objectives, against the strategy.
Hmm. I appreciate you with this answering this question because it's really a tough spot to think about. Um, yes, and it's absolutely right that if your mission matters, then your people equally matter as well. Because without them, there is no mission. There is no way to achieve your vision. I mean, we cannot just based on machines, AI, or automation. We cannot just achieve that vision. So I think that is really a very um, good answer here, Sia. And let's move on to I think the highlight of this conversation is that you say HSPs, highly sensitive persons have an advantage in the age of AI and automation. It is a bold statement. So walk me through this. Like, why would highly sensitive people specifically be advantaged as AI takes over most of the workplace functions?
Yeah, absolutely. When it's AI is taking over some, right, of our workplace functions.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And obviously in some industries, right, with some roles more than others, right? It's able obviously um to automate um and augment to great degree. But what AI enhances, right, for us is this creative space that's left.
Mm-hmm.
That if AI is automating and augmenting our roles, right? Because it's then great at pattern recognition. If it's doing rapid ideation, it's automating repetitive tasks. Then that leaves space for human creativity, for idea generation, um, for leveraging right our emotion and creative and artistic and intelligent, innovative expression. And so that's how I see us really being able to leverage AI as a species in human enterprise is that it frees up time for humans to leverage the things that make us deeply human.
Mm.
Again, emotion, originality, human judgment. Right? AI systems are designed and trained and guided by human knowledge and experience. It will always be that way. Right? But critical decision making, ethical reasoning, the understanding complex and nuanced situations remain uniquely human traits.
Mm.
And highly sensitive people, they have naturally high empathy and emotional intelligence. They're naturally thoughtful decision makers because they process information deeply, considering all the consequences before acting. They're exceptional listeners and communicators, right? They're actively listening, taking in much more information consciously, making them rather approachable and trusted by their team. Again, just natural. They may not even think about the ways in which they're doing this because it just happens. HSPs often lead with a very strong sense of purpose,
Mhm.
driving meaningful systemic and societal level change, right? Rather than just focusing on the bottom line. But these things do impact the bottom line because their ability to translate an organization's mission to other team members attaches those team members to that mission so that they actually are showing up every day and doing the work that needs to be done, which pays the bills, all right, and earns the revenue, right? It gets us the profit that we need to keep this thing going.
Yeah.
So there is a direct connection there to the bottom line when you focus on people and where AI is offering us our time back.
Mm. Do you mean to say they can be very, very good at, um, like nuance, connection, complexity, emotional intelligence? And I think it's a very compelling, uh, point that you make. especially of course in the age of AI. But then, like, what makes HSP specifically advantaged versus someone who has developed strong emotional intelligence, but then maybe neurologically they're not wired as highly sensitive.
You can absolutely nurture what doesn't come
Mhm.
naturally. And that's what's beautiful about the human species is that while some people, right, about 30% of us inherited this trait, highly sensitive,
Mhm.
40% are moderately sensitive, and the remaining 30% are low sensitive, we have the ability to learn. And so someone who's low sensitive and isn't naturally picking up on the subtleties in their environment can learn to be more attentive, right? Through mindfulness, right? Practices, right? Training, engaging with other people who are not like them, right? Anybody can learn, right? Empathy. Anybody can learn the components of emotional intelligence. We all have the capacity to increase self-awareness, to increase self-control, self-regulation, self-compassion, right? These are the components of emotional intelligence. So we can learn to understand ourselves better and others, right? Like our team needs. We can learn to pick up on the signs of our own burnout or somebody else's. So everyone has the capacity for greater sensitivity. Some of us are just wired for it.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a pragmatic way because it does not mean that we are changing our identity or we are completely changing ourselves. It's just kind of unlocking that superpower or that, X factor that would make us not just a good leader, but an inspirational leader. Like, the ones that could inspire maybe one person or maybe so many people out there. And I think that actually makes sense.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so Sira, also let's get practical here because you work with leaders who are actually highly sensitive people. I mean, you help them build on their own strengths while navigating the environments that often weren't designed for them. So, what's one thing an HSP leader could implement in their work life um, that maybe this month or this week that would make a tangible difference?
I think the first step that I would take is, and then I would offer is just doing an honest assessment of
Mhm.
your own nervous system and looking at the environments in which you've done really well and environments that didn't seem to work for you. Um, Paying attention to where you do your best work, how you do your best work, when you do your best work, right? So that you can start to accurately assess, right, your nervous system's needs. Right? Do you respond strongly, emotionally to music, art, or other human creations like design? Do you find yourself needing time to think, research, or process before making decisions? What attention do you put to your thoughts, words, and actions, right? Is it a lot? Like, how concerned are you about consequences? Has anyone ever told you you're too sensitive? Right? If you answered yes to all these things, you may, right, be a highly sensitive person. Um, you can take the assessment that I have, the sensory processing profile, really simple way to understand where you fall on the spectrum, right, with this trait of sensory processing sensitivity. And it doesn't matter where you fall, right? Every type exists for a reason. They're all just survival strategies that help the species. And again, no matter where you fall, leadership skills like emotional intelligence, they can be learned regardless of your sensitivity level. Your wiring is just a starting point for understanding who you are. Like I said, you can nurture what doesn't come naturally. That applies to everyone. All of us need to learn to adapt, right? The low
Mhm.
sensitive group learns to be more empathetic and to understand others. And the highly sensitive person learns to self regulate so that they can be in environments that are typically more challenging or that require resilience. So it's it's neurological wiring, right? It's not behavioral fate.
Mhm.
Uh, but I would say that just getting an accurate assessment of yourself would be my recommendation for where you should start.
I think that's a good starting point here, listeners. So take a mental note of it, or maybe write it in a journal. And before we wrap up, it's kind of a question coming back to you because you have two master's degrees, you have multiple certifications, 15 years of senior leadership experience. I mean, you have clearly put in the work to understand this field deeply. What led you from senior HR leadership to founding North of Normal? Was there any moment of realization or maybe an epiphany, or it was more of a gradual evolution?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have known about sensory processing since I was very little, but I didn't know what to do with that. I had
Mhm.
received a diagnosis early, and it was at that time identified as a dysfunction, is what the label was. Sensory integration dysfunction was then layer updated to, again, in the medical canon, right? The technical term was updated to sensory processing disorder, and I lived with that label, just quietly, because I was in an environment growing up that was very quiet, and I was in a small town, so fewer people, less distractions. My nervous system was doing fine, and so I really didn't have to pay attention to it until I entered the corporate world, and then I was met with this onslaught of sensory information that I ascribed to just the challenges of workplaces, and still didn't really think about my sensory needs and how that might be impacting my experience. And so I spent 15 years in corporate leadership and strategic human resources, organizational development roles, building psychologically safe teams and creating organizational clarity where there was chaos and confusion. And the irony of my situation is that in attempting to meet everyone else's needs, I ignored my own and I burned out. So it was a rather loud signal that, finally came though after a lot of small signals, right, over a great many years. And I don't, judge myself for getting to that place. But I did have to recognize that I ignored a lot of signs. And then looking back, I could see, well, that sign and that sign and that sign, and that these were all precursors to this experience. So I decided to stop trading authenticity for a false sense of stability, and went through what I call a period of agonizing reappraisal, of the way I'd been
Yeah.
living and working and leading, and decided I was going to start something on my own where I could completely design my life and my life's work around
Mm.
my sensory processing sensitivity, and that's how I founded North of Normal.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's quite a journey in there, Sia, because I mean, it can be very overwhelming, but then one thing that I really connected with is something that you mentioned, that, in the process of attending to other people's needs or hearing them out, actually understanding them, somewhere down the line, we kind of unintentionally uh, forget about taking care of ourselves. And it doesn't mean that, all the fluff stuff that we usually see online or on social media, but actually taking or keeping a check of how our body is, how our brain is, how our nervous system is actually responding. And yes, then we see the burnout in there. And then once we try to um, make this change or bring this change within ourselves, um, there's often a fear attached here that, maybe I may go back to my old self, or maybe people will judge me or they'll question me that why am I having certain boundaries here? Why am I not the one I used to be before? So Sira, have you had ever encountered that kind of fear? And if yes, then how did you navigate through it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Um, and the way I describe confidence is fear walking.
Mm, yeah.
Uh, and that is how I've been managing through any fear that I have because there's a lot of messages societally, and contextually. I mean, even friends still, right, do not,
Yeah.
to an extent, don't understand or won't understand, and as may think they're being helpful and then provide some unsolicited advice about how to be. You go, okay, well, no longer listening to you. um, and it can be really demotivating and kind of isolating, to to choose to live in alignment with who you are
Yeah.
and to really trust yourself that that is the only way, right, to be.
Mm,
But yeah, that's in how I've been able to move through that is through reframing fear, right, and thinking of confidence as fear walking, right, that it's a verb, that every action that I take, right, is a progression, right, towards the thing that I know I need to be. And I don't think of it as becoming someone else. I think of it as returning to who I actually am.
exactly.
And that, and even that too, just reframing of that makes it a little less scary. It's like, no, I am this. It's in me. I'm just uncovering it, right? I'm getting back to it. So it's actually a path that, I'm on or that I've walked, right? I'm going back to it.
Oh, that's really beautiful, Sira, and very, um, I should say, heartfelt. So, of course, listeners, as you all know, as we are closing up this conversation, and Sira, once again, if you can share with our listeners if they would like to reach out to you, how they can do that.
Absolutely. Super simple Google search, my first and last name, Sira Laurel. Also, I'm at www.siralaurel.com.
Awesome. Listeners, I'll have all the links mentioned in the show notes. So find them attached along with this episode. And, um, listeners, this conversation, it has challenged, in fact, some of my own assumptions about sensitivity, leadership, and what's actually going to matter as our workplaces continue to evolve. And I think in this AI driven world, um, this isn't about making excuses for sensitivity. It is about recognizing the different neurological wiring, how it can create different strengths. And if you're interested in Sira's work, just hover over to the show notes. And until next time, you have been tuning into BizBlend, and thank you so much for listening to this episode. Take care of yourselves and of your mind, body, your nervous system, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Thank you.